Once the envy of the world, Britain's railways fell into decades of decline with rusting tracks and vanishing lines. But today, something remarkable is happening. The steel arteries of this nation are coming back to life. Britain didn't just invent the railway, it perfected it, exported it, and built an empire on it. The story begins in 1825, when George Stephenson's locomotion No. 1 hauled the first public railway train between Stockton and Darlington. This wasn't just a technological breakthrough, it was the moment that changed human civilization forever. Within 2 decades, railway mania gripped the nation. Between 1844 and 1847, Parliament approved over 600 railway acts. Lines spread across the countryside like veins, connecting cities, towns, and villages that had remained isolated for centuries. Farmers could send fresh produce to London. Factory owners could ship goods across the country in hours rather than days. Working families could visit the seaside for the first time in their lives. The Victorians built railways with ambition that still takes your breath away. St. Pancras Station, completed in 1868, featured the largest single-span roof in the world. The Forth Bridge, opened in 1890, used 54,000 tons of steel and remains an engineering marvel. These weren't just functional structures, they were cathedrals of the industrial age, built to inspire awe and demonstrate British engineering prowess to the world. By the early 1900s, Britain had the most dense railway network on Earth. Over 20,000 miles of track crisscrossed the island. Nearly every town of any significance had a station. Remote Scottish Highlands, Welsh valleys, and English market towns all enjoyed regular train services. The railway employed hundreds of thousands of people and touched every aspect of British life. The network was operated by over 100 different companies, but by 1923, these had consolidated into the Big Four: the London, Midland and Scottish Railway, the London and North Eastern Railway, the Great Western Railway, and the Southern Railway. These companies competed for passengers and freight, investing in faster locomotives, more comfortable carriages, and better services. The streamlined A4 class locomotive, Mallard, set a world speed record for steam locomotives in 1938, reaching 126 miles per hour, a record that stands to this day. Then came the Second World War. The railways played a crucial role in the war effort, moving troops, equipment, and supplies across the country. But this came at a tremendous cost. The network was run into the ground, maintenance was deferred, stations were damaged by bombing, rolling stock wore out. By 1945, the railway system was exhausted and desperately needed investment. In 1948, the entire railway network was brought together under a single organization called British Rail. This marked the beginning of what many remember as the golden age of railway travel, but also the start of challenges that would plague the system for decades. The newly unified railway inherited a network that needed massive investment, but funding was always tight in post-war Britain. The 1950s and early 1960s brought modernization efforts. Steam locomotives began to be replaced by diesel and electric trains. New stations were built in contemporary styles, but the railway was also losing money. Road transport was growing rapidly. More families were buying cars. Goods that once traveled by rail were now going by truck. The network that had seemed essential just decades before now looked outdated and expensive. Then came one of the most controversial moments in British railway history. Dr. Richard Beeching was appointed to examine the railway's finances and make recommendations. His 1963 report, The Reshaping of British Railways, proposed closing over 2,000 stations and 5,000 miles of track. The Beeching Cuts, as they became known, transformed the railway network. Between 1963 and 1970, thousands of miles of branch lines vanished. Small towns and rural communities lost their connections to the national network. At the time, many of these closures seemed logical. Some lines carried just a handful of passengers per day. The cost of maintaining infrastructure often exceeded the revenue generated. But the closures had unexpected consequences. Communities became isolated. Historic market towns declined. Rural areas lost vital economic connections. And many of the lines that seemed unnecessary in the age of the motor car would prove to be desperately needed in later decades. The 1970s and 1980s were difficult years for British Rail. Investment remained limited. Much of the rolling stock was aging. Stations fell into disrepair. The railway became associated in the public mind with delays, cancellations, and shabby facilities. Passenger numbers continued to decline. By the early 1990s, The railway carried fewer passengers than at any point since the Victorian era. But something interesting was happening beneath the surface of this decline. A handful of preserved heritage railways were demonstrating that people still loved trains. Volunteers were restoring old locomotives and reopening closed branch lines as tourist attractions. The Bluebell Railway, the Severn Valley Railway, and dozens of others showed that when railways were run with passion and care, people would come. The 1990s brought massive changes to the structure of British railways. The network was reorganized into multiple operating companies running services under franchise agreements, while infrastructure was separated into a different organization. This restructuring was complex and controversial, and the early years brought significant challenges. The transition period saw confusion, coordination problems, and several high-profile difficulties. Yet something unexpected began to happen around the turn of the millennium. Passenger numbers started to rise. At first, the growth was modest, but it accelerated year after year. By 2014, British trains were carrying more passengers than at any time since the 1920s. Today, the railway carries nearly 2 billion passenger journeys annually, double the number from the early 1990s. What caused this remarkable turnaround? Several factors came together. Growing urban populations meant more commuters. Environmental awareness made people reconsider car travel. Congestion on roads made trains more attractive. Investment in new rolling stock improved the passenger experience. But perhaps most importantly, Britain rediscovered something it had forgotten: railways work. The renaissance of British railways isn't just about passenger numbers. It's visible in the transformation of stations across the country. Birmingham New Street, once a grim concrete maze, has been rebuilt as a spectacular modern transport hub with a gleaming curved roof. King's Cross, behind its preserved Victorian facade, now features a stunning new concourse that has become a destination in itself. Manchester, Victoria, Liverpool, Lime Street, and dozens of other stations have been transformed from shabby relics into bright, welcoming spaces. New infrastructure projects have captured the public imagination. The Elizabeth Line, formerly known as Crossrail, represents the largest addition to London's transport network in generations. This new railway slices through central London, connecting Reading and Heathrow in the west with Shenfield and Abbey Wood in the east. The engineering involved was extraordinary, including tunneling beneath some of the most complex urban terrain in the world. The stations, with their spacious platforms and natural light, represent a new vision of what urban rail can be. Electrification has spread across the network. The Great Western Main Line to Bristol and South Wales, the Transpennine route, and numerous other lines have been equipped with overhead wires, allowing faster, quieter, and more environmentally friendly electric trains to replace diesel locomotives. Electric trains accelerate faster, require less maintenance, and produce zero emissions at the point of use. New rolling stock has transformed the passenger experience. The Hitachi Class 800 series trains, built at a new factory in County Durham, combine electric operation with diesel engines for non-electrified sections. These hybrid trains are quiet, comfortable, and significantly faster than the trains they replaced. The Stadler Class 777 trains on Merseyrail feature walk-through carriages, air conditioning, and accessibility features that would have seemed like science fiction just a generation ago. Technology has revolutionized how people interact with railways. Smart ticketing allows passengers to tap in and out with contactless cards or smartphones. Real-time information systems tell passengers exactly when their train will arrive. Wi-Fi on trains means commuters can work or relax during their journey. Apps provide live updates, platform information, and alternative routes if disruptions occur. Perhaps most remarkably, communities that lost their railways decades ago are getting them back. The Borders Railway in Scotland reopened in 2015, reconnecting Edinburgh with Tweedbank and serving communities that had been without trains for nearly half a century. The success exceeded all expectations, carrying 4 times the predicted passenger numbers in its first year. Similar reopening projects are underway or planned across Britain. The Oakhampton Line in Devon has been restored, reconnecting a town that lost its regular service in 1972. Proposals exist to reopen lines in Northumberland, restore the Waverley route further into the Scottish borders, and reconnect numerous towns that were cut off during the beaching era. Each reopening demonstrates that the railway closures of the 1960s removed infrastructure that communities desperately needed. The heritage railway sector has grown into a significant part of Britain's tourist industry. Over 150 preserved railways operate across the country, staffed largely by volunteers who maintain locomotives. restore carriages, and operate services with the same care and attention that professionals once provided. These railways aren't just tourist attractions. They're living museums that preserve skills, maintain historic engineering works, and keep the romance of steam-age travel alive for new generations. Some heritage railways have grown so successful that they've become integrated into the regular transport network. The West Highland Line steam services carry tourists through some of Scotland's most spectacular scenery. The Swanage Railway is working to reconnect with the national network. The heritage sector has proven that railways can be economically viable while preserving history and serving communities. Britain's railways are also leading the way in environmental initiatives. Trains produce significantly less carbon dioxide per passenger mile than cars or planes. As the national electricity grid becomes greener, electric trains become cleaner too. The railway industry has committed to achieving net zero carbon emissions, with plans for hydrogen-powered trains, battery electric multiple units for non-electrified lines, and continued expansion of electrification. The social impact of the railway renaissance goes beyond transport. Improved train services have revitalized town centers. Property values near stations have increased. Young professionals can live in attractive smaller towns while working in major cities. The railway has once again become a tool for connecting communities and spreading economic opportunity. Station regeneration projects have transformed urban areas. King's Cross in London was once a run-down red light district. Today, behind the restored Victorian station, a new neighborhood has emerged with offices, apartments, shops, and public spaces. Similar transformations have occurred around stations in Manchester, Birmingham, Leeds, and numerous other cities. The future looks even more promising. Major infrastructure projects are reshaping the railway network. Plans exist for new lines, station improvements, and capacity increases that will allow the network to handle continued passenger growth. Technology developments promise even better services, with artificial intelligence optimizing train schedules, predictive maintenance preventing failures before they occur, and automated systems improving safety and efficiency. The railway has also recaptured something intangible but vital: people's affection. Train spotting has experienced a revival, with enthusiasts gathering to photograph new locomotives and visit preserved railways. Railway photography fills social media feeds. Books about railway history top bestseller lists. The railway has gone from being seen as outdated and shabby to being celebrated as an essential part of Britain's heritage and future. This transformation didn't happen by accident. It required investment, innovation, and a recognition that railways aren't relics of the past, but vital infrastructure for the future. It required learning from mistakes, adapting to changing needs, and maintaining the engineering excellence that built the network in the first place. The story of British railways is ultimately a story about perseverance and reinvention. The network that connected the Victorian world fell into decline but refused to die. Today, it's busier than it's been in nearly a century, carrying more passengers, connecting more communities, and playing a vital role in addressing climate change and urban congestion. From the birthplace of the railway revolution to a system struggling to survive, and now to a network experiencing remarkable growth, British Rail has completed a full circle. The tracks that built a nation are being rebuilt for a new generation. The fall and rise of British railways reminds us that great infrastructure built with vision and maintained with care can serve generations far beyond those who created it. The steel rails that connected the Victorian world are carrying Britain into the future.